What's going on, guys? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It? This is your host, Elliot Barr, and is joining me as always. It's Nicholas Anelka's cousin, brother. Y'all come from the same islands, I swear.
No. That's a different island.
It's my man.
We speak a similar language, though. It's Shanir Duran II right here. Yeah.
And for today's episode, if you can't tell, we are breaking down our review of Anelka Misunderstood. It's on Netflix. And
Watch it.
Oh, yeah, you gotta watch it. All right, so I'm gonna ask you this, because Grego from For the Culture, we was in a group chat, we were talking about it. Does he give you Kobe vibes? Like the way how he looks?
He does. He gives me Kobe vibes in the way he looks.
Side note, also today is Kobe's birthday. Rest in peace to the Bean.
Rest in peace to the man.
But yeah, man, I'm going to finish.
No, he definitely just the way he looks, his appearance, and also his physique too.
Yeah,
is very.
He slimmed down a lot.
Yeah,
he slimmed down. I mean, he was already slim, but I can tell by him running in the desert, you are gonna slim down.
Yeah, you gonna get rid of all of that extra body fat. You just lean.
So, one thing that really caught my attention in this documentary, and before we start breaking down the film. First of all, the Dragon Ball Z scene was dope.
I loved it.
Because you know me, I'm an anime fan. And I was like, oh, that's dope. That's dope. And then the music in the film was...
The soundtrack was... I think almost every single track on that soundtrack, in the words of my dude from Dead End Hip Hop, it bumps in the whip.
Yeah,
almost every single one of them.
It's like the box Chevy that pulls into the parking lot. You're like, oh yeah, I need to play this. Like I'm constantly asking Siri, like, Siri, what's this song? What's this? I mean, when I first started off with the documentary, I was a little bit concerned because I was like, is this going to be a puff piece? Like, you know, because you've seen those. Like, I think Barca has one on Netflix called Barca Dreams.
Yes.
And it starts off as like, oh, God, I can tell this is a puff piece.
Yeah,
like,
even though completely just saying, oh, it's the greatest. Yeah, it's the greatest. Nothing went wrong.
And I'm like, even at the end of the Barca thing, they were like, everyone put their own opinion. I'm like, you're lying. But, yeah, I mean, it kind of gives you the insight of who Nicholas Anelka was. And someone like me who really got introduced to Nicholas Anelka at the 2010 World Cup and only hearing the media side of it, I think we made a perfect comparison about who he really reminds us of. It is T.O.
Yes.
He really is T.O. in the sense of, like, T.O., for instance, he was at home in San Francisco. Things didn't work out right.
Yes.
Went to Philly, and then it never really went right there ever since, even though he had Hall of Fame talent. Nicholas Anelka the same way. Started off at PSG, then moved to Arsenal. And you kind of went with this line, that glass door moment of, what happens if Anelka stays at Arsenal?
Yeah, and doesn't go to Real. I mean, I feel that a lot of stuff wouldn't have happened if he had stayed at Arsenal, especially watching this documentary and seeing what that spell at Real Madrid did to him. I think he would have stayed naive for much longer because I think Real Madrid woke him up to the bad side, the dark side of soccer.
I think in the documentary, especially when he got to the Real Madrid part of it, I think he kind of got in a space of, you got to grow up quickly. It's all on you.
Exactly.
The media is going to be constantly. And he also talks about it in a moment where he was at Real Madrid. He was playing a video game. Marca invited him to come play FIFA. But up to that point, he hadn't scored yet.
Yeah.
So he scores on FIFA. And then the headline is like, Nicholas Anelka finally scores in FIFA. And he's just like, you guys invited me. Like, I thought we were cool.
Exactly.
But it's kind of like there you can start seeing who Anelka was. The wall started to develop. Versus where he was at Arsenal, he had compatriots. That he had Patrick Vieira, who talks about picking him up, taking him to training, so on and so forth.
I mean, it's not only that. I think the focus, and I know that some people would kind of turn a blind eye to this or turn their nose up at me saying this, but especially what the documentary has revealed. Soccer in England, to me, in my opinion, on a social standpoint, is pure. Because the focus is on what you do on the field. The focus is on how well you connect with the team. It's not what you went and bought last night, you know. Yeah. And I feel that in a city like Madrid, in a country like Spain, where soccer is not just about the game, it's about the athletes and what they do in their spare time and all of this stuff. And the fact that it got to a point where his mother comes to visit him and she has a panic attack because the paparazzi are literally trying to reach over his fence to get pictures. Like, you don't see that in England. You don't hear about stuff like that happening.
It's not like the English press is any better.
No, the English press isn't any better, but they're not as ruthless. They're not as, I am going to go on the brink of invading your home in order to get a story.
And also, I think it's also key to put context into it. It wasn't like he was just this no-name player that went to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
He was, I think, at the time, the highest transfer fee I think Real Madrid paid in that period, which is kind of weird, you know, hearing that $23 million is a record fee.
Well, I mean, this is the 90s, so of course it's
but yeah, I think
things have skyrocketed since then and gotten to the point of ridiculousness.
So, also the other thing, starting off with Nicolas Anelka, is that he started off at PSG and he went to, well, really the training ground with Clairefontaine.
Clairefontaine, yeah. Which is actually considered one of the greatest, if not the best, soccer academy in the world.
You also know who got rejected from Clairefontaine and became a great player? Wendy Renard. Just saying.
Thierry Henry. Patrick Vieira. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
The list goes on. Almost that entire France team that won the 98 World Cup came out of Clairefontaine.
Yeah. And he was saying that, like, about how Clairefontaine was pretty much like a meat market. Like, it was like 500 guys come in, 20 guys might get signed, and 3 of them might go pro.
Exactly.
Like, it really is the thing of, like, you have to show in, day out to be a pro at the age of 14.
Yes.
You know, and he goes on from that, goes to PSG, and something about, like, that PSG moment to me really stood out because not only did he score in his debut, but it's about how he kind of already was fighting against the system. Exactly. And he was like, I don't want to be boxed into this. I'm more than just a footballer, you know. If I'm not getting the opportunity here, why would I stick here at PSG where I can go to Arsenal?
Yes.
And we always hear the story about how Arsene Wenger has these weird scouting trips, and he's like, oh yeah, I almost signed Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yes.
I almost signed Leo Messi, but this one pays out. Because I have it written here in the notes about, like, he pretty much sent scouts to watch him, and Anelka said, and he asked Anelka, like, do you want to come to Arsenal? And Anelka was like, yeah, I want to come. I'm tired of floating between the first team and the junior team. I want to play.
Yes.
And it's cool to see that.
And I do feel that, and it's one thing that we're definitely going to need to touch on, and I think we talked about probably having an episode dedicated to Arsene Wenger and that Arsenal, and his stint at Arsenal with regards to his
like with black players,
yeah. and one of the reasons why Arsenal has such a big black following. You could see that in the interview with Arsene Wenger, you could see that he valued Anelka. He really, really valued him. He looked at Anelka and said, this guy can be our next big thing. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you got to realize that this is around the time where Ian Wright is going to be soon leaving Arsenal, and it's getting to the point where you need a replacement for Ian Wright. And based off of his performance when he first gets to Arsenal, of course, his first year he doesn't really get a lot of playing time.
And he almost questions whether or not he wants to stay, I think.
Exactly. He questions whether he wants to stay. There's one point, they're getting ready to travel for a game, and Arsene Wenger comes to his hotel room, and his bags are packed, and he's like, I'm leaving.
I imagine Arsene Wenger as, like, Mr. I don't know why. Every time I see Arsene Wenger, I think of Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
It's just how his demeanor is.
His demeanor and his
the way imagine him coming home, taking off the shoes. It's like, what we're doing today, friends? And, like, just talking to Anelka. And I think that's what Anelka needed.
It is.
Like, he needed someone just to be tough on him, but also let him know, like, hey, I'm here for you.
Yes.
You know, because Anelka also alludes to it throughout the film about how his parents really never came across as saying, I love you to him.
Yes.
So it was like one of those things, like, it's understood, but we're not saying it. And he talks about how he wants to say "I love you" to his kids. He wants his kids to say it back to him. He wants to be something pure, and I think that's what he has with Arsene Wenger.
Yes,
but I understand the reason why he leaves Arsenal, because it's like, yeah, if Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, there's certain teams in a tier that if they call you, you're going regardless. You're not turning that down. Yeah. That's like me and you being like, all right, we're podcasters, but if NPR come calling with that check, we go.
Where do you want to set up our stuff?
I am free Monday through Friday. I can talk about it and everything. But it really comes down to it. But I think Arsenal, and we were talking about it, about how it was everything that he needed at that moment. About how like Patrick Vieira was there, and he was kind of being brought in to replace Ian Wright. I mean, him and Ian Wright had overlap, but he was the kind of the bridging gap for him.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, hey, second year, he takes off. Completely takes off. I think what they do to double that year, winning the Premier League, winning the FA Cup.
Yup.
You don't fault him. But I mean, like I said, I can see why he left Arsenal, because you don't think of Arsenal as winning European Cups as you do Real Madrid, who has the legacy of winning. I think at that time, they were on 7. Mm-hmm. So, hey, I understand it.
Yeah, I understand him going to Real Madrid, but a part of me feels like, was it too early? Was it too early in his career to sign for Real Madrid? Because again, going back to that culture shock of you finish a game at for Arsenal in London, and you're going home. You can walk down the street and you'll have people probably raise a glass to you if they're sitting at the window of a pub, like, "Hey, there he is," and that's about it. You may get a few snaps here and there from reporters and paparazzi, but to literally have to drive 2 miles an hour down a main road because paparazzi are swarming your car in Madrid, that drastic change is something that at the age of 19 years old? Yeah. That's hard to deal with.
And I also think it's the difference of how Real Madrid at that time period was set up, because they're starting into the Galacticos era.
Exactly.
They're starting into this era of, it's like they said, it's dog eat dog. Like, you're not here to be my best friend. You're not here to be coddled. You're here to do a job. Yeah. And if you don't perform in that job, we'll buy the next person to bring you in.
Exactly.
So everyone's already kind of hyper, like, tensive. And I think...
And I mean, one thing that he was talking about how when he got into the locker room and he sits down and then a player comes in and says, "That's my seat," and he has to move. "Oh, okay, sorry." And then another player comes, "Yeah, that's my seat." Okay, I gotta move again. Like, that type of mentality... He was saying that wasn't the case at Arsenal. At Arsenal, it was a team. Like, we were here together. We came together as a team, and we, yes, we had a job to do, but we did it together as a team. Like, this is a situation of I'm trying to make sure that I look good. Yeah.
And I also think it's another thing of why this move. I know we're really harping on this transfer to Arsenal to Real Madrid, but it's a
pivotal point.
Yeah, it's a pivotal point in his career, because it can change so much. But I also think another reason why he chooses to move to Real Madrid is because of the fact of he doesn't get called into that 98 World Cup team. He's the last cut. And you might know the coach names better than me. Because French is literally your second language.
Yeah.
But Jacquot was pretty much just like, when it came to cutting players from 98 team, I think they had 26 and you can only have 23. Yeah. No, it was 29 and you can only have 23. Yeah. So I think the extra players, he went through and told each player, this is why I'm cutting you.
I'm going to have to let you go.
And he literally gets the knock and was like, it's normal.
It's normal.
Like, there's nothing else.
No, I mean, and I think to give a little bit of a better translation, it's like, it's basically like him saying, like, it's obvious. Yeah. That's basically like saying it's obvious. And that, I mean, here's my thing. What do you mean it's obvious? If you brought it down to 29 players only to realize that you needed to cut 6 more, the fact that he made it to that 29 means that he has something that you want. Yeah. So for you to sit there and say, oh, for you it's obvious. It's like, wait, what? Then I wouldn't have been here in the last 29.
Yeah.
If it was obvious, you know?
And I mean, I think the manager had to make that decision. It's like, do you keep Henri or do you, keep Anelka? Yes. And I mean, hindsight is 2020. We don't really. I mean, the film only shows us so much about what went into that decision. But I don't see why you couldn't keep Anelka. I mean, he came off a wonderful season, winning the double. Yeah. And arguably, he probably did more that year than what Henri did. Because if memory serves right, Henri was still at Juve. Yes. And it's funny enough now to really look at it because we looked at the transfer. When Anelka leaves, it's a day before Thierry Henry comes in. Exactly. Like, they're walking past each other at the door like, hey, buddy. Hey, bud. But even their careers, and I want to talk about this more, like, their careers are so weirdly parallel to each other because they both went through Clairefontaine, and they both were kind of like this French media darling. And it kind of got so many points where they're like intersects, and then it doesn't. And then it comes back and it intersects, and then it doesn't.
It's like they cross each other briefly all throughout their careers.
You know who they remind me of? Naruto and Sasuke.
Yup, exactly.
They're eternal rivals that are brothers, but they love each other. But then you're like, I know y'all done hit each other a couple of times.
Probably at Clairefontaine, they probably done got into fights.
But yeah, so Anelka is now at Real Madrid, and oddly enough, like, this is where the media, like we were talking about, the media really starts harping on him. But they really start going at his family because one of his brothers was a former player, another one was a financial advisor. And Arsene Wenger also talks about it about how the media was kind of saying, like, oh, the brothers are controlling his moves. Oh, the brothers are doing this. The brothers are doing that.
The brothers actually wanted him to stay at Arsenal. Yeah. They felt that he needed to stay longer. And in fact, when you look at what happened at Real Madrid, you can see why they were like, no, stay at Arsenal for a little bit. And he decided, no, when Real comes calling, you answer. Yeah. Because you never know when that opportunity is going to come again.
Yeah, and I mean, also with the other thing too with Anelka, he mentioned, and this is a great point about how the media handles black players and how they handle white players. Yep, and also about how it's like if I was to go out here and sign an agent and other people, they'll get considered my family, but when my family does it, it's considered a clan. Like it doesn't make sense. I'm trusting people that I grew up with and that has this experience.
That have my best interest at mind. Yeah. Yes, they're definitely trying to get. They're trying to make a living, of course. But at the end of the day, what comes first is what's best for. What's best for me? What's best for me as a player? Yeah. It's not. I don't know. It just, for me, it always felt that anyone who did that, and we see it clearly also today with some of the criticism that Kylian Mbappe has gotten. The fact that his father is his agent.
And no, who's a better example?
Neymar, there you go.
Yeah, Neymar's the better example with his father being super close. Yeah. And
at the end of the day, wouldn't you rather have somebody who has your best interest at mind, being your manager as opposed to someone who just wants the bottom line?
Yeah, you see it with someone with like Mino Raiola. Like, it's kind of the situation where certain clubs won't deal with him because they know, like, you're just worried about your agent fees. Yeah. You're not really worrying about what the player has to do. And even at Real Madrid, he was talking about how he kind of got into an altercation. I'm trying to remember it exactly, but he got into an altercation of when he came back from the Club World Cup, which, by the way, was a turning point in his career because up to that point, I didn't know he was going to score again.
Exactly.
That's kind of what he was talking about. He was like, yeah, I went to Club World Cup and I was able to get away from Spain. And
exactly. Once he got away from all of that oppressive paparazzi culture.
And he's able to go there. He does well. Comes back and it's kind of just like he wanted to ask him a question before training. Yes. And they were just like, oh, we'll talk about it later.
We'll talk about it after training. He said, no, I want to talk about it before training. He said, no, we'll talk about it after training. And it's like, You paid $22 million for this guy. Why don't you give him a quick listen before practice? That's how I feel about that situation.
Well, also you also got to remember who Real Madrid were at that time.
I know.
They weren't calling no one. Like, and think about it too. It's kind of he might be getting the label of bust at this point.
Exactly.
So they're kind of just like, we don't really care about what you got to say. We'll move you on. Like, whatever you got to say, you can save it for after training.
Yes.
And Anelka, I think if he has someone like Vieira around him, I think he handles it differently. But since he doesn't have someone like that to be like, hey, don't handle the situation that way, it kind of like Anelka's like, well, if you're gonna put up a wall, I'm gonna put up a wall.
Exactly.
And this is where the comparison to T.O. comes in, because when T.O. was in San Fran, he had someone like Steve Mariucci and others to kind of just be like, hey, don't
get in your own head.
Don't get in your own head. Don't do the wrong thing. And then when T.O. goes to Philly, it's like, well, I'm gonna do this, And I think that's where Anelka kind of goes about it wrong. And I think the media kind of just harps on it because, granted, they're in Spain. They're going to take up the side of Real Madrid every time before they take up the side of the player. Hey, guys. After this podcast, go check out our newest sponsor, Non-League America. They give you the most in-depth exploration of the diversity of the United States through the lens of soccer. They're also your source for behind-the-scenes look at soccer culture and the independent amateur club scene. Non-League America is not media in the traditional sense. They are content creators who use no claims to be unbiased. They are also staunch supporters of independent black-owned clubs, spending money with black-owned businesses and suppliers, and advocating for systematic change to our system that will give these clubs greater equality and opportunity. You can follow Non-League America and check out their documentaries on Facebook and on YouTube, and the link provided down below. So, if you support us, go support Non-League America. And it just became a power struggle between him and Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
But, Anelka, to his credit, and like he said, like, when I'm able to focus on football, and he didn't want to be a star. When he's able to focus on football, he turns up.
He turns up. And that's one thing that he has done consistently throughout his whole career that you saw in this documentary, that every club he went to, he was popping in goals. He was dropping goals left and right. With every club that he went to, he was a player to watch. But even at Real, he had moments. Even though he wasn't scoring, he had chances. He had moments of flash, moments where he showed you who Anelka was.
Yeah. He came up big in the Champions League semifinal against Bayern, and he played in the Champions League final against Valencia, right?
Yes.
And then Valencia at this time was, I think, back-to-back Champions League semifinalists.
Yes.
So, he also said he felt like he could have done more, I think, just because of how the whole team. And I think if you put Anelka 25, because he gets the Real Madrid when he's 21, 20?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you put Anelka in Real Madrid 24, 25,
that's a whole different story. That's
because he's able to get that youth and just all of that immaturity out. Exactly. And he's able to be a different player there. And he said he kind of regrets his time at Real Madrid, which I can understand because it's like, also that Real Madrid team, now the more I think about it, it was such a cluster bomb because it was the Galacticos, but they didn't really,
not yet the Galacticos.
They didn't really win anything.
Yeah.
The more I think about it, it wasn't like how it was under Zinedine Zidane. When they won like Champions League 3 years in a row with league titles and Copa del Rey, it was kind of like a league title here,
Champions League here,
a cup title here. Yeah, it wasn't like they were dominating gunshot over La Liga. So I understand where he takes on fault for it, but then I also like, it's not all your fault.
Exactly.
But honestly enough, I think him winning that Champions League final gets him called back into Euros 2000, which is weird. Oh, let me ask you this: how do you take his time with the France team?
His time with the France team, I feel, was disappointing, and not because of him, but disappointing because of the lack of judgment of those in charge. Yeah. For example, when you look at that France team that won in '98, you have that situation where he feels like, well, look, I just missed out on winning the World Cup. Because at the end of the day, if memory serves me correctly, when you look at the finals, yes, Thierry Henry was on that team, but he wasn't. I remember that game. The 3-0 win against Brazil. You forgot that Thierry Henry was there. The names that you remember hearing were Ilian Thuram, were Didier Deschamps, Zidane, Manuel Petit.
I just want to say the pronunciation that you have right now is so beautiful. I feel like listeners are like, oh, I can smell the croissants.
I mean, and it was strange. I mean, Patrick Vieira was on that team, and you didn't see much of Thierry Henry as much as you would have expected, seeing the star he became.
Yeah.
So if Anelka was there, what difference would you have gotten? You know, what other player do you feel the France couldn't have done without to put Anelka in there? And I feel that Anelka definitely could have fit in on that team.
Yeah.
And with what he brought, it wouldn't have made much of a difference. France would have still won the World Cup. And then Anelka would have had, a World Cup under his belt, which probably would have completely changed his career.
Yeah.
But apparently it was obvious.
Yeah. The other thing too is like it kind of depends on the manager. Well, he had no good relations with any of the Frenchmen because it was kind of just like he was getting stuff thrown against him that he's like, yo, that's out of my control.
Exactly.
I mean, granted, he doesn't get called into the 2002 World Cup because he was kind of jumping around from club to club at that
yes.
moment.
And 2006, he wasn't getting as much first playing time. And in fact, when what was his name, Djibril Cissé, got injured and wasn't going to be able to play in the World Cup, they brought in Sidney Govou instead of him. And it's like, well, Anelka scores goals like it's nothing. Why would you not bring him in?
Yeah.
And even though Govou was tearing it up for Lyon around that time, but
and I mean, like, also, like, I remember it was part of the documentary where he was sitting in his locker room and the French manager at the time, Santina,
yes,
came in. It was pretty much just like, I didn't pick you because I don't know you. And Anelka was like, how don't you know me? Like, I played for Real Madrid, I played for Arsenal, I played at PSG, I played at these big team clubs, I've scored these big time goals. You saying that to me is pretty much like, you don't care to get to know me. So why, like, don't pick me? Yeah. And I mean, I understand where Anelka's coming from, but then I'm also just like, he's that manager at the time is not saying that to Thierry Henry.
Exactly.
You know?
And at the end of the day, I think by then, Anelka has as much clout as Thierry Henry in terms of...
At that particular moment,
that particular moment, he has just as much clout. So if you don't know him, it's because you didn't want to.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that he could have done differently to put you in a situation where you would know him. And again, I feel that Anelka in this situation over and over again for the French national team is a victim of favoritism, bias, and at sometimes racism.
Yeah.
Although it's very...
He's the easy one to target out. It's like, once again, like with Terrell Owens.
With Terrell Owens, he's the easiest one to target. But again, it's very strange and interesting because when you look at the French national team in '98, in 2002, in 2006, in 2010, those teams were filled with characters.
Yeah.
Zidane wasn't a saint. Thierry Henry has got
I laughed so hard when he said the hand of hellfire. But that's something true to the fact of like Maradona gets praised
for his hand of God. But Thierry Henry has the similar situation happen and he gets vilified.
And Anelka speaks like he's like, it's one thing. He's like, I understand other countries coming at France and whatnot, saying,
but for the French media not to stand up for Thierry Henry.
it kind of pretty much just go at us. It's kind of just like, well, damn. You know? Like, who's going to have our backs? And
exactly.
I think Anelka was a little bit more, he wasn't took it back with it because he was like, I'm used to it. I think Henry, what you kind of talked about, was kind of more like, whoa, who got my back? You know?
Exactly. I mean, and one thing, another thing that also furthers this argument is Maradona never outright admitted that he used his hand, even though the evidence is there. Thierry Henry admitted to the fact that the ball did hit my hand. It was a scramble in the box. The ball hit my hand, but I played to the whistle.
Yeah. And
that was his answer. And at the end of the day, it's funny that we have someone like Luis Suarez who has bit someone how many times?
Luis Suarez literally volleyballed a ball out of the net.
Exactly. And he got his red card for it. But what the argument is he was punished for it. Ghana just didn't capitalize on the fact that he had to do that. He took one for the team. And in that situation, that's Thierry Henry doing what he needs to do to get his national team qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah.
In that situation, no, he didn't say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here and handball this. It wasn't premeditated. It was a scramble in the box. The ball hits his hand because he moves his hand up in reactionary state, and a handball. Okay. He admits that it was a handball, but at the end of the day, if you have somebody you need to vilify, it should be the referee for not calling it.
Yeah.
You know? The player can only do but so much. Because at the end of the day, in that heat of that moment, what did you expect him to do? Just step away from the ball and be like, I handballed it, so I'm not going to kick it into the goal.
Handsies! I'm sorry. That was so childish. That was so childish. So pretty much, at the end of it, Anelka leaves Real Madrid because things are working. He goes back to PSG for $35 million. And the thing that I read into it wasn't like PSG paid $35 million. This is not PSG oil money PSG that we know now.
Exactly.
This is PSG like, hey, finishing third in Liga is good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great season.
That's a good season. That's an awesome season. We're celebrating. Yes, so, third place.
At this time, PSG was owned by Canal, who's, I think, the big TV provider there, and Nike. And Nike paid for his wages, and Canal paid for the transfer fee for him to come there.
Yes.
He gets the captain's armband, and it's not like anything really changes there. It's like, I think they get to a European final. I think it was the Intero Cup.
Yes.
At that time. But he only stays there for 2.5 seasons. He goes on loan to Liverpool, and here I think he found his second home again in Liverpool. And I mean, he was scoring goals left, right, everything. Yeah. But I think. And they talk about the documentary, it's pretty much like Julian didn't like the fact that his brothers... Julian perceived his brothers to go behind his back.
To try and solicit other clubs to buy. And here... But this is...
This is the part that I was kind of confused on.
This is the part that kills me. And it really got under my skin when we reached to that part in the documentary. Because I'm like, really? Like, if you sign him... and he wants to come, regardless of whether other clubs are asking, if he wants to come to you, he's coming to you. So what are you worried about? Yeah. At the end of the day, what are you worried about? He's shown that he literally lands on his feet when he gets to Liverpool, scoring goals left and right. Scoring goals left and right, just completely becoming at home with this Liverpool team. Him actually liking living in Liverpool. Yeah. I mean, what do you have to worry about?
Because like you said, I was able to focus on football.
He was able to focus on football. And in the meantime, of course his brothers are going to be looking at other clubs. Would you be interested in buying him in case Liverpool don't buy?
Yeah.
I mean, what is he going to do? Just put all of his eggs in one basket? No other player is expected to do that. But Anelka is?
Yeah. Like... It was kind of like he was held to a weird double standard. And I mean, granted, Liverpool doesn't sign him. He goes to Man City. And nothing really changes there. But, I mean, he does the same thing. He scores goals and he gets his, another big move?
Another club record high. It's sad that this is at a time Manchester City, $13 million is a club record high for Manchester City. Right now they're signing players for like $200 million.
It's so weird. Like, he predates big team before he gets there. Like Arsenal, for instance. He predates Arsenal before they become the Invincibles.
Yeah.
He predates Real Madrid before they become the Galacticos.
The for real Galacticos.
He predates PSG before the oil money comes in. He predates Man City before the
oil money comes in.
It's like, dude, once again, wrong place, wrong time. But the other downside to it, I think why he doesn't get called up to the French national teams as much as he should have, is because he is doing a lot of movement between clubs. Like, I think he played for, 6 clubs in the span of 8 years at one point?
Yeah.
So that, let alone, it doesn't matter how good of a player you are. If you're playing for 6 clubs in 8 years, you're learning differences. You're having to learn players. You're not really invested and bought into one particular place.
Yeah.
It's hard for you to get kind of bought in anywhere.
Yeah, it's hard for you to get bought in anywhere, but at the end of the day, he always lands on his feet wherever he goes, and it ends up, within the first couple of games, he's already knocking goals in.
Yeah.
And it's really strange. It's really, really, really strange that, it just baffles me that he was there at Manchester City. Like, they had Nicolas Anelka before they moved into the Etihad. Like,
yeah, that was weird. That was weird to see.
It's like, what?
But so 2005, he gets brought back to the French national team for the first time, and it was really. I think this is like a real cool, touching moment. And I was really hoping things would work out better for him in France when he gets to play for France in the Antilles.
Yeah.
Against, Costa Rica in his homeland of Martinique.
Yes.
And it's just like, and he scores and when in front of the family. I'm like, all right, maybe this is where things
are gonna turn around.
Things are turning, but they don't. But he does get his move to Chelsea.
Yes.
At this time period.
And I think I would say that this, apart from that moment in the Champions League finals for Chelsea against Manchester United, I do feel that Anelka really came into his peak at Chelsea.
Yeah, this was supposed to be the Anelka that was at Real Madrid.
Yes, this is the Anelka that we should have been at Real Madrid. This was the Anelka that was just devastating. When DJ Drogba is injured and Anelka says, all right, I got you. I'll cover for you. And he comes in and he is just scoring goals left and right. Just scoring goals for fun. I actually can clearly remember that time where I hated Anelka. Because being a Man U fan, I hated Anelka. I was like, stop scoring! He would just...
I think all the listeners just heard how much you hate him.
I mean, it was a love-hate. It was like, you... It was basically probably the way, Real Madrid fans looked at Ronaldinho.
Yeah.
Like... Would you stop being so good?
Just tired of clapping you. I mean, yeah. I think everything, and I think his biggest credit to Chelsea is, of course, missing the spot kick, in the penalty shootout in the Champions League final, because he said it all came down to me. It fell to me.
Yeah. It was one of those situations where it's unfortunate, and I clearly remember, and I'm glad they actually showed that PK because it just brought back memories.
Yeah, this was your first Champions League.
This was the first full Champions League final game that I had watched. Champions League final match, Manchester United versus Chelsea, and the two things I remember from this game, the two things I remember the most were, first, that Moscow pitch was garbage. And the fact that it was raining made it even worse. Yeah. And second, Nicolas Anelka didn't take a bad PK. He just lost the mind games with Edwin van der Sar.
Yeah.
And the way they showed Edwin van der Sar pointing to his left as if to say, you're going to kick it this way. I know you're going to kick it this way. And immediately doesn't even hesitate and dives to his right to save Anelka. Anelka allowed Edwin van der Sar to just completely just mess with his mind.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it happens, whatever. But you can see that situations like that are the bread and butter of soccer players, of strikers. Like, I gotta score goals, and if I miss a PK, it's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. No matter how good I do after that, and basically that's kind of what he said. No matter how well I do after that, it's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. And literally after the following season, Anelka is just on fire.
Yeah.
But he still has that hanging over his head. So it's interesting how Anelka. The strangest thing for me with Anelka is that he deals with a lot of these emotional situations, but it very rarely affects his playing. It very rarely affects his performance. Real Madrid is probably the only time that outside sources have affected his performance throughout his career, and that's something that's a big deal.
And I think he was just too young for the situation.
He was too young for that situation, and it was an extremely overwhelming situation. So,
I mean, and then we really get to the two incidents that I think everyone knows Anelka for. Which one you want to start with? You want to start with World Cup, or you want to start with the celebration?
I want to start with the celebration.
All right,
we'll go in chronological order.
I'll let you go full throttle with this one because I don't know how to pronounce it. So I'll let you do it.
The famous quenelle. The quenelle is a gesture that was associated, and it's funny how the media always runs away with it and takes it completely the wrong way. And even the documentary got it wrong, because the quenelle was a gesture that was used by a French comedian called Dieudonné, who a lot of his act focused on how the flaw of the oversensitivity of the Jewish community, and how literally, unless you're praising the Jewish community, you're anti-Semitic. It's basically like was his angle.
That was like his whole thing.
That was his angle. It was basically saying like unless you're groveling at the Jewish community, you're anti-Semitic. And that gesture was his way of voicing that, of saying that I don't hate Jewish people, but I hate the fact that you try and make the world feel sorry for you and grovel at you for the rest of time. And so it was a gesture that had become popularized in terms of just a rude gesture. It didn't really hold any cultural meaning anymore. And Nicholas Anelka does this gesture.
So the whole backstory of why he did the gesture
had nothing to do with that.
And that's the part I didn't know at first. Because I saw it, and I remember the news articles are like, oh, Nicholas Anelka does Semitic handshake, da-da-da-da. But now seeing the documentary, you're like, oh, wait, I know why he did it now. I think Anelka's in too much. He doesn't regret doing it.
No, he didn't
regret doing it. But I think if he had more context about it, I don't think he does the gesture. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, pretty much he does the gesture because the manager of West Brom, Steve Baker, I remember, he was the manager at Chelsea at the time, and if anyone who's watching that, you pretty much know. But pretty much he gets benched in the first game, and he's like, you brought me here to score goals, and you benched me in the 70th minute?
In the 70th minute?
You're saying the striker ain't doing nothing.
Exactly.
Okay, bet. Baker gets fired, Anelka comes back in, and Anelka scores goals.
He scores his first game with the new manager. The new manager puts him on for the first game, and he scores. And that was a gesture to that old manager saying, this is what happens. This is what happens if you let me play. So now, screw you. You put me on the bench, you let me rot on the bench, and you got fired because you put me on the bench. Now, this new guy comes in and puts his trust in me, and I'm giving him everything he needs. So it was a gesture that was directed at the previous manager. And at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. No. And even in its original form, even if he was doing it because of Dieudonné, it's still not an anti-Semitic gesture.
No.
So,
but the crazy thing is about it is, like, even though he said, he was like, show me where it's anti-Semitic. And they came back and said, like, oh, it's not. And he's like, okay, so then why am I still getting fined and suspended for 5 games?
Exactly.
And it wasn't like...
They couldn't give him an answer.
It was kind of just like, well, You know, it's just like, dang, like why you got to do all that for me? But also at that time period, I mean, I think Anelka was already fed up with the media. I think
he was fed up. He had gotten to the point where he was fed up with the media. And at the end of the day, this is the one thing. We have the one problem we have is that the media is just.
It's a common thing with the media where like
they take things out of proportion because they're itching for a story.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it around the same time that they pretty much said the British media didn't pick up on it. It was the French media, and he was like, "You guys not even here. Why are you picking up the story?"
Exactly.
You know?
It goes to show. I mean, if you don't have anything to talk about, don't talk about anything. If you don't, but the media, they got to make money, right?
Yeah, they do. So let's go on and get into the last day, the World Cup. Oh man, it's such a headache because, and I think we're all guilty of it, like believing what the media says because we're like, oh,
we have no other source.
Yeah, the media's reporting. We're like, okay, we'll take it at your word. And I was kind of just like, dang, Anelka's like this? Like, he made a coup d'etat? And come to find out, Anelka was like, I have no parts of this.
It's because he was sent home that the rest of the team boycotted practice.
Yeah, but also I think, like, he talks about how he wants to retire from the first team leading up to the World Cup because he's like, we have no chemistry. We're not playing well. The manager won't change his system.
The manager won't put me in the position that best fits me.
And the thing that's crazy about it is Dominique came up to him and was like, hey, I want you to be my striker. And then Anelka tells him, like, if you're going to play me as striker, just know I'm not staying up top all by myself. I'm dropping back to kind of develop play. Pretty much, Dominique says, like, Anelka, I want you to be my striker. I want you to be my striker. And Anelka's let him know, like...
Yeah, you know what type of striker I am.
Yeah, don't have me out of position. And I think Anelka was already just over it because he's just like, yo, this team isn't working. I don't want to be here. I think Anelka was kind of just like, all right, I haven't played in the World Cup. This is my last chance, more or less. And you already want to retire. It is kind of like that thing when you got 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
He was never really truly bought in.
Well, I don't know if it was that he was never truly bought in because I think him and Thierry Henry both felt, all right, this is our last hurrah. Like, this is our last chance. And for him to see, like, okay, our last chance is a complete dud because this coach has no idea what he's doing. And to be honest with you, from the first game against, I forgot who it was.
Mexico?
No, the second game was Mexico, the 2-0 defeat to Mexico. Who did they play first? Was it Algeria?
No.
It
was who was the name? It was France, Mexico, South Africa. Oh, Uruguay.
The 0-0 draw against Uruguay. I remember that game, and I remember seeing a France team that was disjointed. There was a sense of confusion with regards to the squad, and it was like, okay, so what am I doing? What am I doing this? And I remember seeing like Anelka dropping into the midfield, and it was and looking at it and being like, okay, he's dropping into the midfield and then has no way of being part of the attack.
Yeah. But
if he sits up there, he's just sitting up there doing nothing because of the way the team was set up. Like, you can tell that the coach completely messed up. Yeah. He got his lines crossed completely. And I mean, in the second game against Mexico, it was even worse. It was even worse. Like, that first half was like, what on earth is going on?
Oh yeah, halftime of that game, crazy.
So my thing is, with everything that the media has done with regards to with regards to Anelka is it just kind of fed right into the lie of what he said to the coach in the locker room.
Yeah.
What he allegedly or reportedly said to the coach in the locker room. And because of that, you kind of see Anelka kind of give up. And he's like, you've painted me as the villain this whole time, even though I wasn't. There is no way I'm going to get out of this with the truth.
Yeah, and what he said versus what was reported are two totally separate things. And it even comes at a point where Anelka is just like, first of all, how did this even leak out? You know, because this is something that happens in the locker room where stuff are supposed to be said secretly.
Yeah.
And he's already frustrated. You can tell that by the way how he comes out. But also, I think the construction of this France team is poor. Like, it was a team on his last legs. Most of the players was already over the hill.
Yeah.
A coach not really know what he was doing. And it just didn't work. Nothing worked out perfectly for him. And when Anelka gets sent, doesn't come out for the second half and get accused of, and I'm probably going to have to beat this out, but pick your own squad, you son of a bitch. It's kind of just like, well, dang. Like, I don't want to see Anelka put in that light. I didn't appreciate it in the film because of the fact of that's not who he was at all.
It wasn't.
He gets this bad rap because it's easy to put a label on him and blame everything wrong on him.
Yeah, because he had put up these walls. And this all goes back to that Real Madrid situation where he felt, all right, I've got to put up this wall. Well, and so when he puts up that wall, it's misconstrued as him being villainized, basically.
And also, is kind of gets thrown at him because of how the French media was already going at him because of this move from PSG to Arsenal.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to be the player doing this. You're out of your realm. You're out of your depth. And Anelka's like, no, I'm in my depth. I can do this. Like, I'm my own brand. But then also the training field accident where, and this is something that was new to me about how Anelka was just like, he pretty much told the guys, was like, look, if you guys don't do it for me, do it for you. Like, I'm not playing. I'm done.
They're sending me home. So
whatever you choose to do is on you. Yeah. And the players decided to do it, but then in the media, it got constructed as Anelka was the co-conspirator and the reason why this was happening.
Yeah.
And by the way, if there's ever a guide on how not to handle a situation as a coach, it's that.
Yes. The way he handled that situation was...
Well, all the coaches...
The coaching staff was just...
You had the physios trying to fight players. You had a coach throw his whistle. Dominique was like, you ask the players. They don't want to train. But it was pretty much just pointing the finger. But that doesn't get highlighted at all in the media. Instead, we get players... We get to talk of the players getting held hostage on the bus and Anelka being a co-conspirator. And I'm just like, he's not involved in any of this.
He isn't. He's already home. He's already on a plane back home.
Yeah.
And the thing that really got me and made me realize how dirty the media can be, how just corrupt the media can be.
Oh, and I forgot, he never showed up for the coaches meeting they tried to set. The players meeting. You remember?
Yes. So the players decided to, like, so I think it was Patrice Evra, Thierry Henry, and I think there was another.
I think Vieira. I'm not
I don't
sure.
think it was.
I think it was just those two. It was
them two. They called Anelka down from his room and called the coach so they could all four of them sit down and resolve this issue.
Yeah.
Coach never shows up. Coach is no longer in the hotel. Coach went and hid somewhere.
Yeah.
Like that, to me, and that's not reported. And then on top of that, 8 years later, this same coach is on some talk show, some television talk show, and is asked about that situation. And rather than saying, oh yeah, so Anelka told me, go blank yourself, you son of a blank. He said, you worry about your own effing team. If that's all he said, what was all of this about?
Yeah.
And especially the fact that all of the players that were interviewed in this documentary were like, Nicholas Anelka has never been the type to just go off the handle for nothing. If he blanks, it's because there's some built up situation happening. So at the end of the day, when he blanks, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. No. And so when he has that moment where he does go off and does say, you worry about your own damn team, because the one thing that they focused on, that they honed in on the documentary, and he actually was the one who said it when they were interviewing him, was that after him being frustrated at the fact that he was played as not the same type of striker that he is, he was forced to play up the field and just be a victim of whatever's going on in the midfield rather than allowing him to drop back into the midfield to get involved with the play, to pull the ball forward. The way the France team was not performing because of the coach's strategies, he's already frustrated. And we get into the locker room. Coach comes in, and the first person he points a finger at is Anelka. Yeah. And Anelka just lost it. And in any situation, if anyone else had done that with all of those situations in place, that player would have been defended. They would have been like, oh, the coach singles him out unjustly, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, well, what about Anelka? Because the coach singled him out unjustly in this situation, and he just says, you worry about your own fucking team. And basically, in the situation that you're dealing with now, okay, 8 years later, this is what the coach said that he said in the room. Not a single article points to the fact that this is two completely different stories. Not a single news report, not a peep about the fact that this coach just changed his story 8 years later. And in the meantime, Anelka is painted as a villain. Yeah. And it's really crazy. It's really crazy how much Anelka, throughout his entire career, is painted as this uncoachable, unruly character, when all he was someone who stood up for what he believed in. Yeah. At the end of the day.
So I think the quote that pretty much sums this whole documentary the best is by, once again, Arsene Wenger. He might be a player who gets too much success too early. It was helped with a little, but he was also in a place that were uncomfortable for him and didn't make him feel at home. Yeah. You can see it. He never really finds that club outside of Arsenal that is his home, but because he gets too much too early, he doesn't recognize it as his home, and then it's kind of like the grass is greener on the other side, and he regrets it, and you can't get cuts back on it. So
that's one of the situations that you see a lot in a lot of professional players' careers. You look, for example, at Alessandro Pato.
Your pronunciation of his names is amazing.
Like he goes to AC Milan, and he's dubbed as this next young star. And today, Alessandro Pato should probably be in his prime, and we don't hear a lick about him. Yeah, you kind of saw the same thing was about to happen to Marcus Rashford. You see a lot of players that get pushed into the deep end too early. And I think with his signing to Real Madrid, Anelka was pushed into the deep end way too early, especially a club like Real Madrid. And which is one of the reasons why I'm actually kind of happy that a player like Kylian Mbappe didn't immediately jump into the Real Madrid boat when people were saying, oh, he's going to sign for Real Madrid. I'm really glad he didn't, because that could have been a second coming of an Anelka 2.0, because that environment is toxic. It's vicious and it's merciless. And if you're too young, you're not ready for that. You're not ready for it at all.
So after you listen to this podcast, let us know what you think. We just want to thank everyone that's been listening to this episode. Thank you guys for rocking with us. Big shout outs to Andrew and Suzanne that became supporters of our podcast. If you're interested in becoming a supporter of our podcast, you could do so at the link provided down below. Also, shout out to our first sponsor, Non-League America, who you probably heard in the middle of this podcast. Shouts out to them for believing in us and wanting to be a part of our podcast. If you're interested in being a sponsor for our podcast, you can hit us up on Twitter at RiverCity93. Just email us and we'll start the conversation. But with that being said, guys, as always, like, share, subscribe, and review to the podcast. Can I Kick It on all podcast media forms? Is there anything else I'm forgetting before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, so with that being said, guys, as always, this is Elliot.
This is Shamir.
We'll holler at you guys later. Keep us on the good side.